Joining me now to discuss this is UN Watch Executive Director Hillel Neuer, who's usually in Geneva but in Tel Aviv at the moment, I assume, for the pandemic. Welcome back to the program, Hillel. Why do you
Thank you,
think
Sherry.
Helen Clark is not the right independent person to oversee this crucial inquiry?
Well, I think she was chosen for precisely the reason that she's very close with the World Health Organization. They know that for the past year during the pandemic, time and again, she has given them a free pass. She has excused them. She has defended them as being exceptional, as having world leadership. She's defended their siding with China time after time. She's made false assertions regarding their position on the travel ban. So she's been in their court from the beginning. So they picked someone who's supposed to investigate the global response to the coronavirus pandemic, which includes the WHO response. It includes what China did. And they know that she's going to give them a free pass. That's very clear. And it's surprising that she would try to contest that. She says that we're smearing her. Well, I want to go, Shari, on your program and say that I invite Helen Clark to sue me for defamation in court, because the truth is a defense and we'll invoke the truth.
Well, look, we, just presented some of the clips which you referenced in your letter to her, which is part of the case for, what you're saying, which is that, very politely she has spoken in favour of the WHO, and that you would think would be a conflict of interest of some sort when you're meant to be investigating that very body. But Hillel, I want to ask you, what does this mean for this inquiry that she is overseeing? Does this signal to you that the inquiry, and it's due to report in May 2021, that it's going to be a whitewash, that it's not going to be, that she's not going to be prepared to be critical of the WHO or China?
Look, we'll have to see the results, and we'll judge the results, when they come out. But certainly, if the international community, the world indeed, because the coronavirus affects billions of people around the world, it affects everyone. If we're meant to have trust in this so-called independent and impartial international panel, then we need to have a chair who appears impartial. And currently, there are certainly reasonable grounds for a reasonable person to believe that she is not impartial, both because of what she has said already about the WHO's response. She has basically been their advocate. You can't be the advocate for one party and then be the judge. In addition, some of the things that you mentioned is the whole story of China, and I'm happy to talk about that as well.
Look, in terms of, she has been an advocate for the WHO, according to those clips that we've seen. One part that's really crucial about this inquiry, and it's partly why Australia called for it in the first place, is the origins of the virus. Whether it was naturally occurring or whether there's any credibility to some of the questions that are raised by, credible figures, scientists, something the intelligence agencies are investigating as well, about whether it may have been leaked from a laboratory in Wuhan, and there's two such laboratories that study bat-derived coronaviruses in Wuhan. Do you have any confidence that this is something the World Health Organization inquiry will examine?
Well, there are actually two separate, I think, investigations. One is the Helen Clark independent panel, and I think there's another one as well. But just, for the Helen Clark panel, I mean, in general, I would say the World Health Organization has a terrible record when it comes to China. We know from the very beginning, it's infamous now, that in January, when more and more information eventually reached the WHO, that Dr. Tedros kept refusing to declare a global pandemic, and we know that he came under immense pressure from China. We know that on the first day that he was elected a few years ago, he declared his support for the One China policy. So the WHO chief and their connections to China and their deference and kowtowing to China are matters of public record. With regard to Helen Clark, in her response, and you mentioned there were these New Zealand articles that were deleted. One of them was restored in the New Zealand Herald that reflected her perspective. She said, quote, "I have no ties to China." No ties to China? Helen Clark has ties to China going back 3 decades. When she first met the Chinese leaders back about 20 years ago, they described her as an old friend. She's the one who formed the unprecedented free trade deal back around 2008 between New Zealand and China. She has gone on record as praising China's Belt and Road Initiative, despite the significant human rights abuses that are connected to it. She praised the country's, quote, historic transformation. This was at a time when she was running to be UN Secretary General. And indeed, there were news articles saying that China is keen on Helen Clark. Whether they voted for her in the end is a separate matter, but there are serious articles which were posted by the New Zealand professor who is the expert on China's influence in New Zealand, pointing to Helen Clark's attempt to woo the Chinese when she was running for Secretary General. So she really has a long history with China. She went on a TV show, a video. It's an online video show called The China Current, which is hosted by this guy named James Chow, who's you mentioned him. He's a Chinese propagandist, out and out. One can watch the videos. They're paid for by the Chinese United Front. There are shameless propaganda videos. She went on that program, and in defense, she said, well, other people did, and I have freedom of speech. Yes, Helen Clark, you have freedom of speech to go on Chinese propaganda shows, but don't expect the world to trust you as being credible on investigating China when you have extensive ties. She said she has no ties to China. She has extensive ties to China. We don't know if she's being bought off or anything. We have no evidence of that, but clearly she has extensive ties to China, the Chinese regime, and it raises serious questions about her impartiality, despite her protestations, which I think methinks she protested too much.
All right. Well, Hillel Neuer, thank you very much for your time so early in the morning in Israel, and we are going to follow this inquiry closely. I look forward to having you on the show again in the future. You've obviously been on many times before, and I really appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.